Hey Geeks, Ma Tim here with the fourth and final batch of Star Trek the Animated Series. So I'm going to continue the numbering from Season 1, but technically these 6 episodes are the only episodes from Season 2. Just a little trivia fact. So we got episode 17, Pirates of Orion. Now, I've always called them Orions, like the Orion slave girl, the green aliens. But I noticed in this episode they call them Orions. So I'm going to have to wait until we get to like Enterprise or something to see how they pronounce them. If you guys know, like, let me know. But I'm just going to say Orion. So we've seen the Orion slave girls before. Like I said, even in the very first episode, The Cage, we saw one. But we've never seen the men of the species. And this is the first time we've seen the men of them. So that's kind of interesting. And then, like I said, we don't actually see Orions again until Enterprise, where we'll see the men of the species for the first time in live action. So that's the episode itself is kind of interesting. It was written by a 19-year-old. But yeah, so it's the first Orions or Orions. We got episode 18, Bem. This episode was really bad to me. But it was interesting because, like I said, a lot of people don't consider the animated series to be canon, which that's fine. But this is the first time we've actually heard Kirk's name Tiberius. We've seen James T. Kirk and we've heard James T. Kirk. But this is the first time he's actually said Tiberius, and he says it like 4 times. It's really weird. He goes out of his way to say James Tiberius Kirk. I don't think that we see it or hear it in live action until like the 5th or 6th movie. But so this is the first official Tiberius. So episode 19, The Practical Joker. When I was a kid, this was like one of my favorite episodes. I loved this episode. I forgot which episode it is. I should have written it down. In the live action, we see the episode where they give the computer a little bit of a personality. It's the one where Spock says that they went to an all-female race or something for maintenance. So in this episode, the computer gets sentience. And she becomes kind of a practical joker, and she's just doing like stupid gags. It's a fun episode. It's definitely a little kid episode, but it's super fun. Also, kind of interesting that this is the first time that we've seen the holodeck. Bones, Chekhov, and Uhura, I think, go into the rec room, which is the holodeck. And they decide to go for a leisure stroll through the woods, and then as a practical joke, the computer puts them into a blizzard. The holodeck is something Gene Roddenberry wanted to do, but couldn't afford it. And then we'll see it again in The Next Generation, where it becomes like a major staple for Star Trek. Episode 20, The Albatross. This episode itself is just kind of meh, it's whatever, as are most of these episodes. But if you count The Cage to this episode, Albatross, we have now done 100 episodes. So that alone is pretty interesting. I believe Enterprise has 98 episodes, I think. So if you count the animated series and the movies and whatever you want, the original series is longer than Enterprise, but if you're just going by episodes, then the original series is technically the shortest series with only 80, but we are now at that 100 mark, so congratulations. Episode 21, How Sharper Than a Serpent's Tooth. Kind of interesting because this is the first crew member that is Native American. We saw the one episode where Kirk was kind of stranded on the planet and he got married and was about to have a kid. But now, I think his name was Walking Bear. We see a Native American crew member, which again, later on, especially in Voyager where we get Chakotay, becomes a very important role. And then fourth and final, The Counterclock Incident, episode 22. This is kind of an infamous episode. It's the last episode of the animated series. And it is, like I said, some people consider this canon, like Paramount, the company that owns Star Trek, and some people don't, like Gene Roddenberry, the creator. So this episode has kind of played havoc with the 2 different groups of people, because this episode introduced Robert April, who's a Commodore when we see him. According to this episode, he was the original first captain of the Enterprise. We know Kirk, and we know before Kirk it was Pike. According to this episode, before Pike, it was Robert April. So it's kind of interesting to see that this was the original captain. So that being said, there was never mention of him again. Because even in Star Trek, in the Menagerie 2-parter, we see Pike. And then in the new movies, we see Pike. For this episode, though, with Robert April, there's been some fan fiction books that have been written, or just books that have kind of had Robert April in them. And then kind of interesting, in like the 5th episode of Discovery, Robert April, his name appears in text, where the captain asks for like notable captains, and like Pike shows up in there, Jonathan Archer from Enterprise shows up there, and Robert April shows up in there. So it's unclear on if it's canon or if it's not, but he is in there. Also, like, this episode's kind of interesting because we see adults turning into kids, which is something we'll see again in like the Next Generation. And like I said before, with the whole warp speed, at this point they hit warp 36, so warp is just, it's nothing at this point. It's not until we get to the Next Generation where it becomes a finite. We can only go to like 9.9. And that's it for the animated series. So that being said, next I'm going into the live action movies, starting with the motion picture. I'm going to be doing that later tonight, and because the motion pictures are so long and so dense and there's so much to talk about, I'm actually going to be doing it live. So today, this afternoon, 5 p.m.-ish, I think, Pacific time where I live, I will be coming at you live with Star Trek The Motion Picture. I will see you guys then.